Imagine for a moment that you could build an ideal society. What would it look like? One packed with strict laws and harsh punishments to keep everyone in line? Or perhaps a society where people simply behave themselves, where kindness, respect, and honor were not just exceptions, but the rule, where harmony flowed naturally from the character of every citizen. It sounds like a utopia, doesn't it? Yet more than 2.5 millennia ago, in a China mired in chaos and war, one man believed this was not only possible, but the only way to save civilization. He was neither king, general, nor prophet who spoke with the gods. He was a teacher, philosopher, and frustrated political advisor who spent his entire life trying to convince the world that the answer to its problems lay not in new weapons or tougher laws, but within ourselves. His name was Kong Qiu, but the world would come to know him as Confucius. And his philosophy, Confucianism, would become the backbone of one of the world's oldest civilizations, shaping the lives of billions in China, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. But what exactly is Confucianism? A religion? A code of laws? A political philosophy? Today, we are going to dive deep into this ancient school of thought. We will meet the man behind the ideas, decode his basic concepts, explore his monumental legacy, and discover why, in the 21st century, the world is once again turning to this Chinese sage's words for answers. This is the story of Confucianism. To understand Confucianism, we must first need to understand the world that produced it. Confucius was born in 551 BC, during a period of Chinese history known as the Spring and Autumn period, or Chun Qiu. The name sounds poetic, but the reality was brutal. The ancient Zhou dynasty, which had ruled China for centuries, was in tatters. In practice, the land was carved into dozens of rival states, ruled by ambitious dukes and princes locked in endless wars with one another. Into this landscape of moral and political collapse, our protagonist was born in the state of Lu, or Lu. Although his family had noble origins, they had fallen on hard times. Confucius lost his father very early and was raised in relative poverty by his mother. Yet from childhood, he displayed an insatiable passion for knowledge. He devoured the ancient texts, studied ritual, music, history, poetry. He viewed study not merely as a means of personal advancement, but more importantly as a way to restore order. Confucius believed that China did not need new inventions, but a rediscovery. He looked back to the early Zhou, an era he idealized as a golden age in which rulers were wise and virtuous, and society lived in harmony. He saw himself as a transmitter. His mission was to rescue and revive ancestral wisdom to heal the wounds of his time. He tried to do this through politics. Thanks to his learning, he obtained a few administrative posts in his home state. He was meticulous and fair, striving to apply his ethical principles to governance, but the court was riddled with intrigue, and its rulers were more interested in power and pleasure than in virtue. Frustrated, at 54, Confucius did something radical. He resigned his posts and set out on a long journey. For more than a decade, he traveled from state to state, accompanied by a growing band of disciples, searching for a ruler willing to listen, a prince courageous enough to put morality above brute force and implement his reforms. He never found such a prince. He was ignored, ridiculed, and even threatened with death. Politically, his pilgrimage was a failure. But as a teacher, it was a resounding success. Confucius accepted students from every social class, from young nobles to commoners. What he taught was not merely how to read the classics, he taught how to think, how to reflect on oneself and on the world. He tried to teach them how to become better people. Tired of the wandering life, he finally returned to Lu in his later years, devoting himself to teaching and to organizing the classics that would form the basis of his philosophy. He died in 479 BC, perhaps feeling his life had been a failure. He could not have been any more mistaken. The seeds he planted would germinate and grow into a giant tree whose branch would cover all of East Asia. But what were these powerful ideas? What was Confucius's blueprint for the individual and for society? To grasp that, we would need to look at the pillars of his thought. The first and most important concept is Ren, or Ren in Mandarin. Translating Ren in a single word is almost impossible. It is benevolence, humanity, kindness, compassion, altruism, all of this and more. It is the quality that makes us truly human. It is the awareness that we are all connected. It is the ability to put oneself in another's place. the famous golden rule found in many cultures. Do not do to others what you would want not done to you. For Confucius, cultivating Ren was the supreme goal of life. A person with Ren treats others with respect, empathy, and dignity, not because a law compels it, but because he recognizes the shared humanity in every person he meets. But how does one practice Ren? How do we turn this abstract idea into concrete action? That is where the second pillar comes in, Li, or Li in Mandarin, often translated as ritual or propriety. To the West, the word ritual may sound empty, formal, or outdated, but for Confucius, Li was essential. If Ren is the what, Li is the how. Li comprises the norms, ceremonies, customs, and manners that structure our lives and teach us how to express Ren appropriately. Think of it like learning how to dance. You may feel the music, that is Ren, but you might learn the steps, that is Li, to dance in harmony with your partner and with others in the hall. It is not about following rules blindly. It is about internalizing a set of practices that shape our character and promote social harmony. Li gives us a script so that our interactions are not chaotic, but orderly and respectful. For Confucius, the laboratory of virtue is the family. That brings us to the third fundamental concept, Xiao in Mandarin, or filial piety. Xiao is the profound respect, love, loyalty, and duty that children owe to their parents and ancestors. It is not mere blind obedience. It is a sense of gratitude for the life and upbringing they received. It means caring for one's parents in old age, honoring their memory after death, and crucially, conducting oneself in a way that brings honor to the family name. Confucius believed that filial piety was the root of all other virtues. If a person learns to be a good child, he has the foundation to be a good friend, a good neighbor, and eventually a good citizen. The family is the training ground where we learn the lessons of respect and responsibility that we will later apply to society at large. If someone strives to cultivate Ren, practice Li, and honor Xiao, he is on the path to becoming what Confucius considered the human ideal, the Junzi, often translated as gentleman, exemplary person, or noble person. A Junzi is not someone born noble, but someone who becomes noble through effort and self-cultivation. He is not perfect, but is engaged in a constant journey of moral and intellectual improvement. Confucius continually contrasts the Junzi with the Xiao Ren, the small man. The fundamental difference? The Junzi understands what is right and just. The Xiao Ren understands only what is profitable and advantageous to himself. The Junzi is calm and serene. The Xiao Ren is always anxious and worried. The Junzi seeks harmony. The Xiao Ren seeks conformity. The Junzi is the moral leader who inspires others by his example. Confucius said that the virtue of a Junzi is like the wind, and the virtue of common people is like the grass. Wherever the wind blows, the grass bends. And what is the tool for transforming an ordinary person into a Junzi? Education and self-cultivation. For Confucius, education was not about accumulating information or passing exams. It was about character formation. Studying the classics of poetry, history, and music was not to appear clever, but to expand empathy, understand human nature, and cultivate virtue. Self-cultivation is a lifelong process. It begins with the sincere intention to become a better person, continues with diligent learning and the constant practice of rituals, and culminates in a life of benevolent action. These concepts, Ren, Li, Xiao, and Junzi, form the heart of Confucianism. They outline a plan for building a harmonious society from the bottom up, starting with the individual, radiating to the family, and transforming the state. Confucius's ideas were not set down by him in a single great book. They were preserved and transmitted through a collection of texts that became the canon of a civilization. The most famous and central is undoubtedly the Analects, a compilation of dialogues, aphorisms, and anecdotes recorded by his disciples. Reading the Analects is like overhearing fragments of conversation with the master, small nuggets of wisdom on governance, ethics, and daily life. During the Song dynasty, about 15 centuries after Confucius, the great philosopher Junzi selected 4 texts as the perfect introduction to Confucian thought. They became known as the 4 books: the Analects, the Great Learning, the Doctrine of the Mean, and Mencius. And these 4 books were only the gateway to an even larger universe, the 5 classics. These were the ancient texts that Confucius himself studied, edited, and revered. The classic of poetry, the Book of Documents, the Book of Rites, the famous I Ching, and the Spring and Autumn Annals. Together, these texts formed the foundation of China's educational curriculum for almost 2,000 years. Within this vast tradition, fascinating debates arose after Confucius' death. The 2 most important interpreters of his legacy were Mencius and Junzi, and they disagreed on one fundamental point: human nature. Mencius, who lived about a century after Confucius, was an optimist. He argued that human nature is inherently good. All of us, he said, are born with 4 germs of virtue: the feelings of compassion, shame, courtesy, and right and wrong. He used a famous parable. If one of us saw a child about to fall from a well, we would feel alarm and compassion immediately. We would not think about reward or reputation. We would simply act out of an innate impulse of kindness. For Mencius, education does not create virtue, it nurtures it. As a good gardener tends those precious shoots so they may blossom. Junzi, on the other hand, was more pessimistic, or perhaps more realistic. He looked at the chaos of the world and concluded human nature is bad, or more precisely, inclined to selfish and disorder. We are born with desires and envy which, if left unchecked, lead to conflict. For Junzi, goodness is not innate, it is acquired. Morality is an artificial product created by the sages of the past to save us from ourselves. He used the metaphor of a crooked piece of wood. By itself, it will never become straight. It has to be pressed, steamed, and forced against a mold to be straightened. For Junzi, education and rituals, Li, are the mold that corrects our crooked nature and turns us into moral beings. This tension between the views of Mencius and Junzi, good nature versus bad nature, shaped Confucianism for centuries. Yet note what they share. Both passionately believed in human perfectibility through effort and education. For both, salvation came not from a god, but from the diligent work on one's own character. Confucianism did not arise in a vacuum. It had to compete and dialogue with other great schools of thought in China. To understand it fully, we need to meet its philosophical neighbors. Its main poetic counterpoint was Taoism. If Confucianism is about social order, duties, and structure, Taoism is about harmony with nature, spontaneity, and individual freedom. The Confucian is the careful architect who designs the perfect city. The Taoist is the gardener who lets plants grow according to their own nature, intervening as little as possible. Confucianism seeks the Tao, the way, through ethics and morals. Taoism seeks the Tao as the mysterious, flowing force of the universe itself, and the best way to follow it is through wu wei, non-action, or effortless action, like water that goes around obstacles without fighting. They represent 2 faces of the Chinese soul, the social and the natural, the classic and the romantic. Its toughest rival was legalism. Legalists laughed at the Confucian idea of ruling by virtue. For them, who shared Junzi's view of man's selfish nature, the only way to govern was through clear impersonal laws, and, above all, extremely harsh punishments for the slightest infraction. To the legalists, trusting in a ruler's morality was a foolish risk. The strength of the state lay in its power to punish, not in its character. Clash was not merely theoretical. When the ruthless Qin dynasty unified China in 221 BC, it adopted legalism as its official philosophy, burnt Confucian texts, and persecuted its scholars. It was a collision of worldwide views, order through virtue versus order through fear. And finally, there was Buddhism, which arrived from India centuries later. Buddhism brought a completely new set of ideas to China. While Confucianism was deeply of this world, focused on family, society, and government, Buddhism spoke of suffering, karma, reincarnation, and the quest for enlightenment to escape the cycle of life and death. The Confucian ideal was the engaged citizen. The Buddhist ideal was often the monk who renounced the world. This new philosophy posed a major metaphysical challenge to Confucianism, which, centuries later, led to the emergence of Neo-Confucianism, a movement that tried to integrate Confucian social ethics with a more sophisticated cosmology and psychology, in part to answer the deep questions raised by the Buddhists. Confucius's ideas, tempered by these debates and interactions, did not remain confined to China. They embarked on a journey across East Asia, transforming every culture they touched. In China, Confucianism became the state ideology during the mighty Han Dynasty. For almost 2 millennia, mastery of the Confucian classics was the key to power and prestige. The imperial examination system was created, a revolutionary invention. In theory, any man, no matter how humble his birth, could become a high government official if he dedicated himself to study and passed the rigorous exams. This created a class of scholar officials who governed the vast Chinese empire, uniting it not only by military force, but by a shared ethic and culture. In Korea, Confucianism, especially its Neo-Confucian form, was adopted with even greater fervor during the Joseon dynasty. Confucian values of hierarchy, loyalty, and especially filial piety took root so deeply that some say Korea became more Confucian than China itself. The beautiful Neo-Confucian academies, or Xiao, now UNESCO World Heritage Sites, testify to Korea's dedication to Confucian learning and virtue. In Japan, Confucianism was adapted to suit a society ruled by a warrior class. During the Tokugawa period, the shogunate used Confucian ethics to create a hierarchical and stable society. The concepts of loyalty, duty, and self-discipline merged with martial tradition to form the famous samurai code, Bushido. The emphasis on education also flourished, resulting in one of the highest literacy rates in the pre-modern world. But the story of Confucianism is not merely a triumphant march. In the 20th century, it faced its greatest crisis. With the arrival of Western powers, China and its neighbors entered a period of humiliation and identity crisis. Many modern intellectuals, during the May the 4th movement in China, blamed Confucianism for everything that was wrong. They saw it as a feudal philosophy that promoted blind obedience, rigid hierarchy, suppression of the individual, and the subjugation of women. To them, Confucianism was an obstacle that had to be destroyed so that China could embrace Western science and democracy. This critique reached its peak during Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, when Confucius was denounced as public enemy number 1, and temples and texts were destroyed in an attempt to erase the past. It seemed like the end, but ideas are more resilient than statues. In recent decades, we have witnessed a spectacular Confucian revival. And why is this happening? Because amid rapid modernization and globalization, many in East Asia are seeking in their own traditions a sense of identity and a moral compass. The Chinese government, for instance, has begun actively promoting Confucianism. Official rhetoric speaks of building a harmonious society, a concept taken directly from Confucian thought. Confucius Institutes have been created around the world to promote Chinese language and culture. Today, Confucianism is not a monolithic doctrine, but a global conversion, full of debates and tensions. It is criticized for its potential authoritarianism and conformism, but praised for its emphasis on ethics, education, and social responsibility. It is seen as a source of East Asia's economic miracle, for instilling a strong work ethic and respect for education, but also a possible obstacle to innovation and individual creativity if interpreted rigidly. So, trying to answer the title of this video, what is Confucianism? Perhaps one possible reply is that it is a 2.5 millennia old project in engineering the human soul. It is a radical wager on the idea that lasting social order does not come from above, imposed by laws, but from within, cultivated by character. It is a guide for navigating the complex web of human relationships, beginning with a simple principle: be a good person. Take care of your family, honor your duties, study diligently, seek harmony. And through your own example, you can silently change the world.